So the answer to number one was 24. Everyone should be able to get that. For the end behaviors, remember we look at two things. First, you want to look at the degree. You want to look and see if it's even or if it's odd. Okay? If it's even, then you have to decide if it's positive or negative. And if it's odd, positive or negative. And what I'm talking about is the leading coefficient. The leading coefficient is the value in front of the highest degree. Okay? So like the leading coefficient here would be 2. So if you were asked what the leading coefficient of that function is, you would say 2. If you were asked what the degree of this function is, you would say 3. Okay? So once you're here, the way I think about this, rather than having to memorize new stuff, is if it's an even function, the easiest even function is x squared, right? And I know if I have a positive x squared, doesn't it look like this? Everyone is comfortable with that, right? And if I have a negative x squared, doesn't it look like this? So if it's positive, as x goes to infinity, f of x goes to infinity. And if it's negative, f of x still goes to positive infinity. Okay, because it just looks like x squared. For this one, as x goes to infinity, f of x goes to negative infinity. And as x goes to negative infinity, f of x goes to negative infinity as well. So I'm just looking at these two graphs. Okay? Yes, sir. So for odd, when it's an odd degree, I think of the graph of y equals x, because everyone knows what that looks like, right? So if it's positive, the graph looks like this. So I know as x goes to infinity, f of x is going to go to infinity. And as x goes to negative infinity, f of x goes to negative infinity. Because as we go to the left, we go down. The graph of, if it's negative, that's like the graph of y equals negative x, right? So that goes like this. Everyone should know what the graph of y equals negative x looks like. So as x goes to infinity, f of x goes to negative infinity. And as x goes to negative infinity, f of x goes to infinity. So this is all the possible options. So now we just have to look at our problem. Here I have the highest degree is a 3, right? 3 is an odd degree, right? 3 is odd. 2 is my leading coefficient, that's positive. So it's odd with a positive leading coefficient, so this would be my answer right here. Alright, for number 2, it asks you to factor. Alright, you have to recognize this is a difference of cubes. When you have a difference of cubes, you have to use the formula that you need to memorize. You're not going to be given this formula. So the cube root of 64 is 4. The cube root of x cubed is x. And the cube root of 125 is 5. Okay? So this is your first part. So then from here, you just plug it into the formula. So you have a squared, so 16x squared. If this is a minus, remember this is going to be a plus, 20x plus b squared. And for this isn't going to factor nicely, so that would just be your answer right there. Alright, for number 4, it asks you to factor it. Remember, guys, this is just like a quadratic equation just raised to the 4th. Okay, so I've written it like this before, just for you to see that it's a quadratic, but you don't have to write it like that. That's not part of solving it. That's just to demonstrate that it is in fact a quadratic. So don't worry about writing it like that. If you can recognize that this goes 4, 2, 0 in the degrees, x to the 4th, x squared, and then your constant, then you know it's a quadratic. So then, from here, you just do the ACB method and just treat it like any other quadratic. So 3 times 6 is 18, b is 19, so you just need two values that multiply to 18 and add up to 19. So that would be 18 and 1. So you get 3x to the fourth plus 18x squared plus x squared plus 6. Okay? This is where it differs from the quadratic a little bit because here you have 4 and squared squared. Alright? But other than that, it's exactly the same. So then from here you would just factor by grouping. So you group here, group here. So out of this you can factor a 3x squared. So you get x squared plus 6. This you already have x squared plus 6, so you just take out a 1. So you're left with 3x squared plus 1 and x squared plus 6. Neither of those can be factored further, so that would be your answer. Alright, for number 5, you need to divide. Remember, whenever you're dividing, the first thing you have to do is write it in standard form. Both of these are in standard form, they're just missing the constant. You don't have to write that, you don't have to do a plus 0, that's not going to make a difference. Anything else, any other term that's missing, you have to take account for it. But if it's the last term, the constant, you don't have to worry about it. So here I'm just going to do x squared minus 3x into x to the fourth minus 6x cubed plus 10x squared minus 3x. Alright? So I have two terms here, right? So I'm going to look at the first two terms here, and remember my goal is to try and get rid of this x to the fourth. So what can I multiply x squared by to get x to the fourth? X squared, right. So I'm going to multiply this entire thing by x squared, and I'd get x to the fourth minus 3x cubed. And remember, we subtract this, just like with long division. Alright, so now I have negative 6x cubed minus negative 3x cubed, so that's adding. So you get negative 3x cubed plus 10x squared. So remember, I'm just trying to get x squared to match this. So how can I get from x squared to negative 3x cubed? Right, negative 3x. So I get negative 3x cubed plus 9x squared. And I subtract this. Minus minus is a plus, so that cancels. 10 minus 9 is just x squared. Bring down the 3x. How do I go from x squared to x squared? So plus 1. So you get x squared minus 3x. Subtract that and you get 0. So this would be your final answer right here with no remainder. Number 6, it tells you to use synthetic division. So remember, we have to make sure we're in standard form. And this here is my x minus k. So if x minus k is x minus 4, you know that k equals 4, right? So you're putting 4 into the coefficients of the numerator. So you have 1, 6, negative 10, negative 118. And then I just go through the process of synthetic. So bring down the first one. I multiply. You get 10, 40, 30, 120, and 2. 30 times 4. So this is where you have to subtract 1 from the degree, the highest degree. So that's cubed. So now these are going to be my coefficients. So I have x squared, and then you just go down 1 for each term. So x squared plus 10x plus 30. Here I do have a remainder of 2, so I have to add 2 over x minus 4 to the end. And that would be your answer. Alright, for number 7, it just wants you to find the exact values given 1, 0. Remember, if you're given a 0, you're just going to do synthetic division, and then you're going to factor. Okay? So you put 2 in, and you have, remember, we have to put this in standard form, so plus 0x squared. If you don't add that 0x squared, your answer is going to be incorrect. So you have 1, 0, negative 19, 30. And then you go through the synthetic division. So 1, 2, 2, 4, negative 15, negative 30, 0. Remember, you should always get that 0 there because they give you a 0. If you're given a 0, it's a factor. So you now go down one term from x cubed. So you get x squared plus 2x minus 15 times x minus 2 because 2 is a 0 and you already know that. So you want to set that equal. So now you can factor this here. So ACB, AC is negative 15, B is 2. So your two values would be 5 and negative 3. So you get x plus 5, x minus 3, x minus 2 equals 0. So then you're just going to set each of these separately equal to 0. So you get x equals negative 5, 3, and 2. So for number 8, you do the same thing. Make sure it's in standard form, which it is. Your k value is 5. Remember, if your k value is 5, you know you have a factor, x minus 5. Alright, so now I'm just going to put my coefficients. And then I'm going to do synthetic. So I get 5. Whoops, I'm sorry, that's a 1. This is a 5, 0, 0, 3, 15, 0. Again, I got a 0 is my remainder. That should happen every time when you're doing these problems. So I go down 1 degree. So I have x squared plus 3 times x minus 5. So now to solve this, you just set each part separately equal to 0. So you get x squared plus 3 equals 0. So I subtract 3. X squared equals negative 3. Take the square root. So x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 3. When I have a negative under a square root, what do I have to do? Bring out an I, right. So plus or minus I root 3. And then this would just be 5. Because you just add 5. And they already give you that. Alright, number 9. Whenever I do these word problems, the first thing I always do is draw a picture. Okay? So this is a rectangular prism. So I'm going to draw a rectangular prism. Again, I'm an awful artist, but it doesn't matter. It'll give me an idea of what it looks like. Okay? So that's my rectangular prism. It can hold 96 cubic centimeters. It tells me the height is 8 more than the width, and the length is 2 less than the width. So the width is my constant in those two statements. So I know my width is going to be x, my height is going to be x plus 8, and my length is going to be x minus 2. So they tell you the volume is 96 of the prism, and then it asks you for the dimensions of the prism. Volume is just length times width times height. So it's just going to be x times x minus 2 times x plus 8, and that has to equal 96. Right? Because volume is length times width times height. So once you have this, all you're doing is solving. Okay? So I'm going to distribute here. So you get x squared plus 6x minus 16 equals 96. Multiply by x. X cubed plus 6x squared minus 16x equals 96. And once you're here, remember, you have an opportunity to get 4 terms on one side, so you want to subtract 96. So you get x cubed plus 6x squared minus 16x minus 96 equals 0. We have 4 terms. When we have 4 terms, what can we do? We can group it. From this first one, I can factor out an x squared. So I get x plus 6. From this second one, I'm going to factor out negative 16. Get x plus 6. So my two factors are going to be x squared minus 16 and x plus 6. So I set each of those separately equal to 0. So x squared equals 16. X equals plus or minus 4. And x equals negative 6. But distance can't be negative, so x has to equal positive 4. Okay, so I'm not done yet. That just gives me my value for x. So now I'm just going to plug 4 in for x up here in my picture. So I have 4 4 minus 2 is 2, and 4 plus 8 is 12. So the prism is 4 by 2 by 12. So that's just a volume question we solve using a factor by grouping. Okay? The next question says a protective shell 1 centimeter long is to be placed around the prism. So if you add 1 inch to each side, that would just be like putting 1 inch here and 1 inch here. So what would the width be if I just added 1 to each side? Right, it was 4. Now it's just going to be 6. If I add 1 here and 1 here to the length, what's it going to be? It was 2. I just added 1 and 1, so 4. The height was 12. I'm adding 1 here, so that's 13. 1 there is 14. So width the shell would be 6 by 4 by 14.